They were just 10 years old when they lured a little boy to a train track, threw bricks at him, and eventually caused his death. Here are 10 disturbing interviews with child serial killers. Number 10. James Fairweather.
Stood over like that. Not helping that. I stabbed him first there. I've done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing and laughing and laughing louder and louder.
March 29th, 2014. Fairweather attacked James Atfield, a father of 5 who had already just suffered from a car crash. Lying on the grass at Castle Park after drinking, Fairweather brutally stabbed him, putting an end to his life. He suffered more than 100 stab wounds. These defensive wounds on his arms and hands tell a tale of his desperate attempt to fend off that attack. But Fairweather wasn't done. June 17th saw another gruesome act when he targeted Nahid Al-Manea, a 31-year-old student from Saudi Arabia at the University of Essex. This wasn't your typical assault. After the initial stabbing, Fairweather purposefully drove the knife into her eyes. Why? In his words,
to keep her from seeing evil.
The whole town of Colchester was turned upside down. People were so scared they even resorted to cutting down bushes, hoping to prevent any potential ambushes. The police, they were pulling out all the stops, even interviewing Fairweather himself. But the big break was on May 27, 2015, when an alert dog walker noticed Fairweather's odd behavior and notified the authorities. The police arrived to find him with gloves and a knife, clearly up to no good. Or 1999, Fairweather was only 15 years old when he made headlines as one of UK's youngest convicted felons. Life dealt him a tough hand from the start. He struggled in school because he had a hard time with reading. And in 2012, things got even darker when his grandmother passed away. Fairweather's trial was set for January, and he tried a different strategy. He said he didn't do the murders and wanted a lesser charge, like manslaughter, by saying he had mental health problems. But the expert doctors didn't believe him. They said his claims of hearing voices and seeing things weren't true. April 29, 2016, the court gave him a life sentence with a minimum of 27 years in prison. Now what really stands out is how he acted during his interviews. Fairweather talked about his violent actions in a very casual way, without feeling sorry or guilty. This shows a troubling picture of a young man who seems to be lost in a dark world. Number 9. Zachary Davis.
I killed Melanie and left Josh alive to suffer. I didn't feel anything when I killed her, even when her blood splattered on my arm and her brain matter was thrown onto my shirt.
August 10th, 2012. 15-year-old Zachary Davis did a terrible thing. He callously killed his own mother and tried to set his house on fire with his brother still inside. Now, Zach wasn't always like this. When he was younger, he was a quiet kid. But things got really bad after his dad died from ALS when he was just 9 years old. Zach started hearing voices and was diagnosed with schizophrenia and depression. Sadly, his family stopped his therapy too soon, not realizing that it would lead to something really awful. That dreadful night, Zachary, his mother Melanie, and older brother Josh returned from the movie theater. While Melanie slept, Zachary retrieved a sledgehammer from the basement and bludgeoned her to death, striking her nearly 20 times. He then set their family game room on fire, intending to kill Josh as well. Fortunately, Josh escaped due to the fire alarm, discovering the gruesome scene. In a heart-wrenching interview with Dr. Phil McGraw, Zach displayed a shocking lack of remorse as his journal entry was read out loud. When he was asked why he killed his mother, he just said,
"She wasn't taking care of my family."
He described the murder weapon as making a wet thumping sound and explained that he wanted to make sure his mother was dead, so he struck her nearly 20 times. His words and lack of empathy really painted a chilling picture of a young man who had gone down this dark path. Now, Zach's trial was very disturbing. He tried to blame his brother Josh for the murder, but his lawyer admitted that Zach was guilty, saying,
"You turned into a bad person, Mr. Davis. You did terrible things."
In the end, the court made Zach take responsibility for what he did. He was sent to a secure psychiatric facility where he would get the help for his mental health problems. The legal system understood that mental illness played a big part in this horrible crime. Number 8. Brenda Spencer. January 29, 1979. A truly tragic event saw Brenda Ann Spencer, a 16-year-old girl, unleashing a horrifying act of violence. She opened fire on her school across the street from her house, using a rifle she had received as a Christmas present from her father. In the wake of her actions, innocent children and staff members of Grover Cleveland Elementary School tragically became her targets. In her interview, Brenda Spencer made a shocking statement.
It's real because I did it, and I take responsibility for doing, the crime itself.
These words paint a picture of dissociation and detachment from the reality of her actions. It's a haunting insight into the mind of a teenage shooter who seemed to be living in a distorted world of her own making. Her interview statements reveal a troubling fact. She claimed that she had a distorted reality from all the drugs and alcohol she was taking, and experienced hallucinations that led her to see commandos chasing her. She began to tremble in fear, which is why she shot at him. But that's not all. Brenda Spencer's story was indeed dark and disturbing. After her terrible actions, she was sentenced as an adult on April 4th, 1980, just a day after her 18th birthday. She received a severe punishment, 25 years to life in prison, and behind bars. Brenda faced additional challenges like epilepsy and depression. Although she became eligible for parole in 1993, she's never been granted release. Her next chance for parole is set for 2025, but whether or not she'll ever be free remains uncertain, leaving her fate hanging in the balance. Number 7. Nathaniel Brazil. May 26, 2000. In the quiet community of Lake Worth, Florida. It was the final day of the 99-2000 school year. Returning home earlier that day, Nathaniel made a chilling choice. He retrieved a .25 caliber handgun stolen from his grandfather. Armed with this deadly weapon, Nathaniel, just 13 years old, returned to his school. In a tragic classroom confrontation, Nathaniel pointed the stolen handgun at his teacher, Barry Grunow, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck him in the head, instantly killing him. Swiftly arrested, Nathaniel faced grave charges, including first-degree murder. During one of Brazil's interviews, he described what he missed the most, saying,
"So much that is missed. The freedom to, live your own life, the freedom to decide for yourself. I would say that's one of the greatest things I miss most, to do what I want when I want."
He also reflected on the haunting consequences of his actions, admitting,
I have to sit in my conscience each and every day.
When asked about the wife of the victim, he replied,
If I could, I would ask her for forgiveness.
2001. Nathaniel Brazil was found guilty of killing Mr. Grunow and threatening another teacher with a gun. He got a harsh punishment, 28 years in prison, followed by 7 years of probation. He has to spend at least 25 years in prison before he can ask to be released. Nathaniel's situation has become well known, leading to discussions about his punishment. Legal problems and efforts to change his sentence have made this story even more complicated. Right now, Nathaniel Brazil is in Jackson Correctional Institution and might be released on May 18, 2028. Remarkably, his time in prison has seen him complete his general educational development program and become a certified paralegal. Number 6. Joshua Phillips. November 3, 1998. Joshua was home alone when Maddie, his young friend, knocked on his door, asking if he wanted to play some baseball. Sounds innocent, right? Now that innocent request turned into a horrific ordeal. As they played, an accidental strike with the baseball left Maddie bleeding, crying, and screaming. Joshua panicked as he dreaded his father's return home, fearing the consequences. Joshua dragged Maddie into his house, and there the unthinkable unfolded. He used a baseball bat to silence her cries, stripping her of her lower clothing in the process. And the horror didn't stop there. When Joshua realized Maddie was still alive and moaning under his bed, he removed the mattress, slit her throat, and inflicted several brutal stabs with a knife from a Leatherman tool, snuffing out her young life. November 10th, 1998. Melissa, Joshua's mother, entered his room and noticed a wet spot on the floor. What she found would haunt her forever. Maddie Clifton's lifeless body. Just think about this traumatic shock gripping her as she immediately alerted the authorities, leading to Joshua's arrest at his school later that day. Shockingly, he confessed to the murder within hours. In a special interview with the Times-Union, Joshua didn't go into the gory specifics of the crime, but he did share some unsettling thoughts from his mind. He didn't sound sorry at all. Instead, he seemed deep in thought, which gave us a troubling look into his personality. Joshua admitted to adopting a defensive strategy during his childhood. He thought that ignoring problems would make them vanish. This mindset perhaps laid the groundwork for the unimaginable act that he would later commit.
That I had to come to terms in dealing with that I'm going to die in here. I might do 60, 70 years in prison. Really helped me mature and helped me grow.
But here's what's truly unsettling: how Joshua described his time in prison. A line of elderly inmates, some in their 60s and 70s with canes and walkers picking up their medications. It hit him like a ton of bricks. The realization that he might spend decades, if not his entire life, behind bars. During his trial, Joshua was tried as an adult, and the defense chose not to call a single witness. Instead, they based their argument on the idea that Maddie's death started as an accident and then escalated into a state of panic that was almost like madness. The decision from the jury was quick, taking a little more than 2 hours to find Joshua guilty of first-degree murder. He got a life sentence with no chance of ever getting out of prison, stuck in the justice system's harsh punishment. The only reason he wasn't sentenced to death was because of his age. Number 5. Alyssa Bustamante.
Did you use to cut her throat with? A pocket knife? A kitchen knife? Was her throat cut? Yeah. Oh.
October 21st, 2009. Alyssa would do something horrifying to a girl named Elizabeth Olsen. She convinced Elizabeth to go into the woods, and then she strangled her, cut her throat, and stabbed her in the chest 8 times. But it gets even more twisted because Alyssa had planned to do this awful thing 5 days in advance by digging a grave for Elizabeth. During her interview, Alyssa was asked to provide closure on what she did. When asked if she had cut her throat, she replied with empathy and remorse, breaking down into tears as if she confirmed the horrifying act. She was also asked about the weapon she used, to which she replied with a great deal of remorse that
it was a kitchen knife,
gruesomely describing how she committed the murder. But what drives someone to commit such a monstrous act? Alyssa's motive was chillingly sinister. She wanted to know what it felt like to take another person's life. It's a motive that would send shivers down anyone's spine. Born January 28, 1994. She had a troubled childhood. 2002, she was placed in the care of her grandparents due to her mom's addiction problems and her father's incarceration. Signs of her descent into darkness became even clearer around 2007, when she attempted to end things and displayed a chilling, cutting hobby listed on her YouTube profile. Now, after committing this murder, her behavior turned even more disturbing. In her journal, she wrote,
I just killed someone, strangled them, slashed their throat, and stabbed them. The feeling was exhilarating. Once the initial fear's gone, it's exhilarating. Yet I'm shaky now. Off to church I go.
Yeah, she casually went to church while the search for Elizabeth was going on. November 17th, 2009. When the legal process started, Alyssa initially said she wasn't guilty of first-degree murder and using a weapon. However, in January 2012, she accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder, resulting in a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2024, along with an extra 30 years. 2014, when she asked for a break in her punishment, they quickly said no. But there was a bit of good news. If she made any money talking about what she did, they would have to tell Elizabeth's really sad mom, Patricia Preece. During all the legal fights and when she talked to doctors, they said Alyssa had some serious mental problems. They found out that she had major depression and a condition called borderline personality disorder. This showed that she was really messed up in the head and may have had remorse for what she did back then. Number 4. Michael Hernandez. February 3, 2004, in Palmetto Bay, Florida, Michael Hernandez lured his best friend, Jamie Go, into the bathroom, where he stabbed him over 40 times. In the aftermath of this shocking incident, Hernandez's actions and the dark details of the crime would be brought to light during his jaw-dropping interview in 2008. During this interview, Hernandez dropped a bombshell, admitting that he had targeted Jamie because he believed him to be the easiest among his friends to manipulate.
Why did you choose Jamie, your friend?
He was the easiest out of anybody because he would have followed me because we're such good friends. And I knew he would have followed me in there and done what I would have said.
Now that statement really scared everyone in the courtroom. His account of the murder was so horrifyingly detailed, as he described how he got Jamie into the bathroom stall, methodically putting on gloves before proceeding to slit his friend's throat with a knife. The disturbing details didn't end there. Hernandez recounted how he had prepared for this gruesome act, saying,
I got him into the stall by saying, look, I have something to show you. So I got him into the stall, and I told him to turn around because I wanted it to be a surprise.
In a truly unsettling revelation, when questioned about his intentions towards another friend, Andre, Hernandez calmly stated,
My intentions yesterday were to kill Andre, the same way I killed Jamie today, except for the fact that I was going to stab him in the back and here in the neck. And that would have been it.
These admissions provided a shocking insight into the depths of Hernandez's evil intentions, leaving everyone in that courtroom grappling with the horrors of his actions. Now, during the trial, they found out that Hernandez was really interested in famous serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. It's a reminder that the things people are exposed to can have a big impact on young minds. Hernandez believed he was on a dark mission to cleanse the planet through unspeakable acts of violence. 2016, the case takes another twist. Because of a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court changing the rules of how long young people like Hernandez should be in prison, they had to have another hearing. But even after reevaluating everything, a judge in Miami-Dade County still said Hernandez should stay in prison for life. Now, Michael Hernandez died in prison at 31 years old. The exact cause of his death remains a mystery, adding more questions to this already disturbing story. Number 3. Eric Smith. August 2, 1993 was anything but an ordinary summer day. 13-year-old Eric Smith, on his way to summer camp, had an encounter that would turn a sunny day into a dark chapter in history. He crossed paths with Derek Roby, and what follows is truly horrifying. In his interview, Smith opens up about his mindset at that tender age.
Unfortunately, at 13, I viewed life in a very dark manner. I couldn't carry the pain and anguish I felt anymore. So I rode my bike around and it seemed I could take my anger out on him.
These words provide an unsettling glimpse into the events that followed. Smith lured Derek into the nearby woods, ending the young boy's life. He confessed further, saying,
Strangled him. I hit him over the head with a rock numerous times and poured Kool-Aid on him. And I became the bully that I hated in school.
Eric's past shows that he had a tough time growing up. He always felt that he didn't fit in, and he got picked on a lot, mostly because of how he looked. That probably had a big part to play in the sad things that happened. Derek's absence at camp set off a frantic search, leaving the community in utter shock and disbelief. As investigators questioned Smith, he initially claimed he was riding by when the tragedy occurred, making them wonder if he had witnessed something.
They thought that I knew who did it, or I had seen who had done it. But the person they were looking for is me.
Just 6 days later, Smith confessed to his mother, which eventually led to his arrest. In the trial, Eric's lawyers talked about something called occasional explosive disorder, but the prosecutor strongly argued that his age couldn't justify the seriousness of the terrible thing he did. In 1994, Smith was found guilty of second-degree murder and got a sentence of 9 years to life in prison. October 2021, Eric's life took another unexpected turn. After 27 years behind bars, he was granted parole. His release, initially set for November 2021, faced delays due to housing issues. February 1st, 2022, Eric Smith was released from prison, sparking heated discussions about fairness, helping young offenders change, and society's ongoing difficulty in dealing with young people who do terrible things. Number 2. Edmund Keer. August 27, 1964. Kemper's descent into darkness began at the age of 15. After a heated argument with his grandmother, he committed a cold-blooded act, shooting her in the head and back with a hunting rifle. His grandfather met a similar fate upon his return home. Now, Kemper's motives were disturbing. He wanted to take a life and protect his grandfather from discovering his wife's death. In 1991, during an interview with Stéphane Bourgoin, Kemper showed no remorse or empathy as he described his deeds. He made a statement that was profoundly disturbing.
The two girls were killed around 6 p.m. By 11 the next morning, they are both completely gone out of my life. The third murder, which is the second incident, Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO.
And as if that wasn't enough, he further described how he disposed of their bodies without any sign of remorse. In fact, he seemed excited talking about it. In another statement made by Kemper in the interview, he was proudly talking about how he was able to get his victims in his car around Ashby Avenue. When asked about how he selected his victims, Kemper said,
And it was also the development of the passion. If I was drove, they died. Like the last two victims. I was so pissed I'd have killed anybody who got in a car.
He even went after his own mother. April 1973. He violently killed her using a claw hammer and penknife, and then did disturbing things to her body. To add to that horrifying story, he tricked his mother's close friend, 59-year-old Sarah Sally Hallett, into a deadly trap and strangled her to death. May 7, 1973, Kemper was indicted, and his trial was nothing short of intense. Facing 8 counts of first-degree murder, his detailed confessions painted a gruesome picture. Despite his plea of insanity, doctors chosen by the court said he wasn't mentally ill, and the jury found him guilty on all charges. Kemper wanted the death penalty, but he didn't get it. Instead, he got 7 life sentences for each crime, and he'll never be released from prison. He resides at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. The truly disturbing aspect of Kemper's interview is his complete lack of remorse, and the eerie excitement he displayed when discussing his heinous acts, as evident in the statements he made during his conversation with Stéphane Bourgoin. And number 1. John Venables and Robert Thompson. February 12, 1993, in the UK, a boy named James Patrick Bulger was taken away, tortured, and killed by 2 boys who were just 10 years old themselves, John Venables and Robert Thompson. This terrible crime had a huge impact on the United Kingdom. You know James Bulger's mom, Denise, had a really scary moment at the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle, Merseyside. She briefly lost sight of her son there, and it was during that brief moment when Venables and Thompson, the 2 boys responsible for this tragedy, saw a chance. Security cameras actually captured them watching kids and deciding who to target. Their deadly plan takes a dark turn when they approach James Bulger. They take him by the hand and lead him out of the shopping center. This moment was captured on CCTV.
To me, that's me.
So the boy holding James's hand is you.
Yeah.
And the boy ahead of you, in the dark jacket and trousers, Robert Thompson.
The 2 boys then take Bulger on a 2.5-mile walk through Liverpool, where they dropped him, causing injuries to his face. They even joked about pushing him into the canal, while an eyewitness described Bulger as
crying his eyes out.
In an attempt to conceal their crime, they placed batteries in Bulger's mouth and may have inserted some in his anus. They hoped a train would hit him, making it look like an accident. They left him lying across the railway tracks, alone and vulnerable. The boys began to recount the events. Thompson and Venables admitted they killed James. When questioned about the details, Venables explained.
He took me in the rail shop and started filling the inside.
Was he bleeding?
Or either.
Where was he bleeding from?
Face. Then it was Robert's idea to kill him.
The interviews continued separately for both boys. In Venables' case, he displayed emotional distress, often breaking down. His behavior in the interview room was described as bizarre, as he would get up, walk around, and seek comfort and support from one of the detectives. Afterward, Thompson and Venables got arrested and faced charges of abduction and murder. It's pretty unusual, but they were tried as adults because of the seriousness of their crime. The court found them guilty of what they did, describing it as
unparalleled evil and barbarity.
As a result, they were given a sentence of detention at Her Majesty's pleasure, making them the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. Now, 2001, they were released from prison, but here's the twist. They were given new identities and a lot of legal protection to keep them safe from any potential harm by the public. The idea was to give them a chance to become better people and, at the same time, make sure they remained safe.